Running, taking a long one. I am in a mess and really don't know what to do now. My wife and I have been married for about 2 years and have a 10-month-old baby boy. We were staying together for about 2 years prior to getting married, and the reason we got married so soon was because she got pregnant. Although there were some major relationship issues at the time, mainly due to my family's objections to our marriage, a big deal for us. We are both Asian but from different countries. We both decided to commit to each other by getting married and working things out after. The issues we had carried on into our marriage, and I have to admit that I did not put in enough effort to resolve them. I also know that she suffered through a lot, especially with my family, who did not even attend our wedding and have only in the past 6 months begun to accept her as their daughter-in-law. Although we did fight on occasion, I assumed that this was a normal part of being a couple and never felt that things had gotten serious to the point of warranting an affair nor divorce. In December, I noticed that she began chatting online this guy more and more often. I asked her about it. She told me it was just a friend from high school who was now living overseas and was coming back to the country, and she was just asking him to help buy some items from overseas. She reassured me that they were just friends, that I didn't have anything to worry about because she was not in the least attracted to him. When he arrived in the country, their communications became even more frequent and now included texting and calling as well, even after she got the items from him. She was basically glued to her iPhone most of the time she was awake, and they texted each other until almost 2 a.m. sometimes. I confronted her that it was unacceptable for her to do this, and again, all I got were reassurances that they were just friends and that he didn't have anyone else here to talk to, etc. At about the same time, she started going out for hours almost every day, seeming to have an endless number of errands to run. At this time, I was going nuts with suspicion and used the Find My iPhone app to check where she was. I was surprised to see her at a cafe, and when I called up and asked her where she was, she lied and said she was somewhere else. My heart basically sank when she lied, not really expecting that she would ever have an affair, even after all the warning signs. I confronted her that night, and initially she lied about it, said she was there with a female friend and blamed me for spying on her. As if on cue, she got a text from the guy, and I immediately grabbed the phone and saw it was a love text. Only then did she admit to having an emotional affair with him and proceeded to drop a bombshell on me and said that she had already stopped loving me for some month, that the guy wasn't the only guy she was seeing, and that she wanted a divorce. I admitted that there were problems in our marriage, but that I still loved her deeply and that we should think of our son and try to work on rebuilding our marriage together. She refused, and, in the end, all that I could get her to agree to was that she would stop the emotional affair with both guys she was seeing, but she insisted on continuing to be friends as he was too important to her as someone to confide in, and cried terribly because she had to end things with him. After that we had a few more big fights because I subsequently discovered that she was meeting him in secret again, and instead of apologizing, she said that I was too controlling and I was pushing her further away and closer to him by my keeping tabs on her, and asked for a divorce again. Every time we argue, she seems to say things to intentionally inflict as much pain as she can. She had a potentially serious infection, and I felt that things got better after a few days of late-night emergency room visits and me taking a few days off work to take care of her at home. She agreed not to meet him anymore, but today told me that she wanted to meet him again just to talk and say goodbye before he flew overseas again. I reluctantly agreed to it, but at the last minute, I asked her not to go and she immediately blew up again. She then repeated the same things about not loving me anymore and asking for a divorce again. I feel really stupid, but even after all the lies, I still love her and want to work on getting her back and saving our marriage. I also really want our son to grow up having the love and care of both his parents. I am going crazy and really don't know whether to continue trying to win her back or if it really is too late to save our marriage. I tried to ask her to stop all contact with the OM, but she would not agree to end the affair unless I agree to a divorce. She also refused to allow me access to her email, phone. Things got really bad last night, things got violent, and she even brandished a kitchen axe at me, even though I was holding our baby the whole time. She has refused to stop the affair unless I agree to a divorce. I think it is time I talk to her seriously about separation and divorce. We don't have any joint accounts, but the lease and car are in her name for convenience as we are staying in her country, which is extremely bureaucratic, although thankfully, we registered our marriage in my home country. At this stage, our son is my main worry, but I don't know what I can do to stop her as I need to go to work. She has been staying at home since our baby was born. We are going back to my country in a few days, which she says she still wants to go so we can file for divorce. I believe her violence was basically meant to provoke me to get me to hit her back so that she could pin everything on me and say the reason we are divorcing is because I am abusive. Unfortunately, I was unable to control myself and hit her back due to everything that happened and the fact that she wouldn't stop even after I told her she could accidentally hit our son instead of me. I am definitely going to try to get a paternity test done once we go back to my home country in a few days. My comment: when she's faced with losing her husband, her home and her child, reality might set in. At the moment, you are just feeding her what she needs to sit on the fence and treat you like crap. Then, up and recognize her for what she has become. a cancer, cure her aggressively or cut her out of your life. Story 2. The Inexperienced One. I'm afraid of my wife's friendship with a single male classmate. Nursing school. I love my wife. We have 2 children, one is from her previous marriage and one from us. I'm 33 and she is 27. We have been together for 6 years, married for 4 years. My wife is a strong woman, I am a softer man. My wife doesn't cry at the end of a sad movie, I'm usually hiding tears. It's not to say I'm a weak man, but I think I feel more than most men, or at least more than most let on. My wife has some emotional scars. I think this is the reason for some of her hardness. Her father passed of cancer at 13. The reason I point these attributes out is because I may be overly sensitive. The friend. My wife is in nursing school, semester 2. Her school is 1.5 hours away from our home. She commutes 4 to 5 days a week for 2 to 3 hours. She had a group of friends from the first semester. 2 friends were close, 1 female and 1 male. In the second semester they were split up in separate portions of the program. The girlfriend is in a totally different time schedule and the male is in half of my wife's classes. All her classroom time, not in her on-site time. My wife has completely stopped talking to the girlfriend. I guess it wasn't a serious friendship. Lately my wife had mentioned her male friend what seemed to me as much more often than usual. I noticed he and she were texting each other on the weekends, and occasionally at night, even after 10 p.m. a couple times. My wife is an avid runner, and one day she told me she convinced her male friend to bring some running clothes to school and do a run with her during a 4-hour break between classes. Again, she's far from home, so coming home even during a 4-hour break would be a waste of time, etc. At dinner that night she told the story of how he was winded quickly, impressed at her stamina, etc. I thought it was a little weird because he is not big into running but choose to do this with my wife anyways. The following few days there were several texts between them. I'll admit it, I read through her texts. I've never done that in 6+ years. I felt guilty and realized now I should have asked to do it. There were over 200 texts between them, all of them were innocent. They were about very technical school terms and about on-site training experiences, about the newest thing they were allowed to do, like injections, med delivery, etc. Nothing unusual, no innuendos. Some of it was personal, talking about fellow classmates and their weak stomachs or character, friend stuff. At this point I'm going to interject the status of my wife and I's marriage. Prior to this week we were in a platonic stage. We've been distant for months. I realized we'd not hugged or kissed in over a week. We were sleeping with backs to each other. I snore. But it's nice to snuggle up for 10 minutes with the lights out before rolling over. It wasn't happening though. Our physical life was at about once a month. I was feeling really distant from my wife, and she seemed to be closer than ever to her male friend. As I said above, I read her texts because I started to feel jealous. Back to her and her friend. I was struggling with telling my wife about the way I felt, struggling with the fact that me telling her I had concerns was the same as saying I didn't have absolute trust in her. On the third night he texted her at 10 p.m. I don't know what about, although I'm almost certain it was about school and nothing more. At lights out I asked her if she was awake enough to talk. I told her I was feeling jealous of her male friend and I only wanted one thing. I just wanted her to put my mind at ease. She said I have nothing to worry about. She strongly emphasized that there is nothing to worry about at all. She hugged me and told me she loved me and don't worry. The next morning, I expressed how hard it was for me to tell her how I felt. She said she would probably feel the same way if the tables were turned, and we left it at that. We didn't really talk about my feelings or how it made her feel. I feel like there wasn't really any closure, but at least she knew how I felt. The next day she didn't reply to his text at night, and I noticed that he didn't text her much at home. He was the only person she was texting at that time, so I assumed less texts me less from him. 2 days after our talk I checked her texts again, unknowingly to her. All the previous texts between them were erased. Prior to that there were 2 months of texts saved. I don't know if there were more before that were deleted or if that's all there were. She quit telling me stories about school with him in them. Obviously she was trying to make me feel better by leaving him out of the day's stories. I could feel the stories being edited, names left out. It gave me mixed emotions. She wanted to make me feel better, but I may have made her uncomfortable with telling me about her whole day. I was only getting part of it. For the past week I decided that if I felt jealous, I was feeling insecure and I was not being as good of a husband as I could be. If I was threatened by another guy, I must have a reason for that, so I made a large effort to be loving, to be close, to be interested and attentive to my wife. We made love on a Friday night, kids asleep. We arranged for the kids to stay with grandparents and went on a date. She looked fantastic and I wanted to make love that night. She said she was tired, not in the mood obviously, but we made love the morning after just like she suggested the night before. We talked and she suggested that we make a bonding night. Sundays after a show we watched together would be our night together, and we followed through. We both made the commitment that even if we were tired, we'd make love. Even if it was a quickie, it would be good for us. This is day 9 after I told her how I felt. We've been closer than we have in years this week, but I still checked her texts last night. I wish I didn't. I wish I just let it be, but I checked. After reading threads on here, I wish I'd asked her about her texts with him. I wish I'd led her to offer the communications between them for me to read rather than taking it like I did. She has films that are required to watch on her own time at school. Do it before class, after class, whatever, but get them done. She texted her male friend that she was going to wait for him to watch one of the films. They would meet up before class to watch them together. She had also texted him a question about a test. Am I crazy to be worried about her friendship with this guy? I have no intention of asking her to modify any relationship with someone else, but their friendship makes me uneasy. She has always had more male friends than female before our marriage, and she's not a party girl anymore. We are both pretty reclusive people. Don't get me wrong, I have a couple friends I interact with when doing my hobby, which is motorcycle riding. She has her running club, which she goes to every Sunday. Neither of us have had close friends during our marriage, though. Neither of us have had a friend we call when something bothers us. It's always been each other. I did the wrong thing by reading her texts without her knowledge, but I don't understand why she deleted all those innocent texts. I don't have a reason to believe that other texts were deleted out of those couple hundred, but I don't know if they weren't. I think I might be smothering her now. I want her to know I care, but I might be going too far. She is in fantastic physical shape, and I've let myself go for the past couple years. I've been talking about running with her for months. I wanted to do a race with her. I wanted to do this for 2 reasons. Number 1, to get in better shape, and 2, so that we can share a hobby together. I don't want to take over her hobby, but I'd like to share it with her. I've gone on 3 runs this past week, only doing the first mile with her. She's continued on her own for the rest. What should my next step be? Just wait and see. Should I have another talk with her about the way I feel? Should I tell her I read her texts and apologize for the intrusion? I really don't think I should. I don't think any good can come from that. I think I should just never read her texts again without permission. I don't feel as jealous as I did. I feel more confident, but a small part of me is still concerned. Is it unwarranted? Should I just let the topic be and give her some space? I do trust my wife, but obviously a small part of me doesn't trust her. She has full trust in me, and I don't want to ruin the trust we do have. I don't want to damage our marriage because of my insecurities, but I also don't feel comfortable with another man being too close with my wife. When does a friendship become an EA? I'm not as concerned about her dropping him from the topic as you, though. I can feel that it's to try and not make me feel uneasy, but I don't think it's healthy to do that. I have a feeling that she was mentioning him more often because they were spending more time together, and if I somehow, really unlikely that I would, but if I somehow found out they were eating lunch together in a cafeteria or something, that I'd be really uneasy since I didn't know about their level of friendship, so she was making sure to drop hints that she has spent time with her male friend. I also think that she's thought of it from the other side, and that if the tables were turned, she'd be a bit uneasy of me hanging out with a single female coworker that much. This is new ground for both of us, but she'll be working with many males in the near future, so I need to get used to it. I realize that. I will be more supportive of my wife, specifically paying more attention when she's telling me about her day, about what happened with on-site training, clinical, for the day, so I too can be someone to talk to about her focus. Her friend is in the same boat as her, hours of studying, waking up at 4 a.m., etc. I understand that they can identify with each other better than I can, but if I'm more available to talk to, I don't think I'll feel as left out. I understand that I'm 50% of the problem when it comes to being distant. I'm not interested in recording anything. I really don't have a way to get to know the guy. My wife's school is over an hour away from here, and her male friend, who is single, you'd ask, lives an hour further away from us, so he's 2 hours away. My wife does not spend time with him outside of the school day, but does spend time between classes. As I said above, some days there are 4-hour breaks between classes. There is no way I can drive to her school to spend the break between classes with her. Not only is it not feasible time-wise, but it would also be like checking up on my wife, and I don't want her to feel the need to do that. Additionally, you're right, I have a need to feel secure. I'm currently insecure. I realize that. I understand that I feel insecure, and am making changes to increase my confidence. The biggest change is health. Love handles don't inspire confidence in me, superficial as that is. I need to feel healthy to feel confident. Married people should not have close friendships with the opposite gender. The other half thinks that it's a non-issue if the context is appropriate. It's true, oftentimes friendships spawn more intimate relationships, but more often than not, they do not go any further. I think the level of my wife's friendship is on a fine line of what feel appropriate to me. Since it's only been less than a week since I mentioned my discomfort, I will wait and see. I don't expect my wife to all of a sudden stop contact with a friend, but I hope she thinks of how it would make me feel when engaging in activities with her classmate, especially out of the classroom. Example, the day they went running together. Knowing how I feel, if she feels the need to take him along again on a run, I'd be hurt. If she suggested that he join her in a 5K race and they meet up to run that, I'd feel fine. Maybe that seems like a trivial difference, but to me the difference is the context. Sharing time together intimately, only the two of them, and sharing time in a group, totally different to me. I will work on me. I will encourage her to tell me about her day, including everyone in it. I will involve myself more in her activities, joining her on some runs. If she doesn't get what the line is that makes me uncomfortable, I think I should just tell her. Like the running analogy. 1. My relationship prior to my wife. My girlfriend for 5 years, starting in sophomore year of college. When I had to move home for 6 months after college, as did she found our new home in the city we were both moving to. She lived there for about 3 months before me. She met a guy and group of friends she'd made and slept with him several times. She told me later but wanted to work it out with me. We stayed together. A couple years later she was back hanging out with the same crowd of friends and he, the other guy, was one of those friends. She insisted that I was crazy to ask her not to hang around that guy. She insisted that there was no way to be friends with all the friends in that group without seeing him. She would hang out with his girlfriend at the time, at his home. That relationship ended after 5 years, but I'm sure it warped me a little. 2. My wife had an affair with her first husband. She married him at 17 years old. He was in the Navy. She meets some guy on the base and had an affair. They divorced. She was a kid. I don't hold it against her. She told her husband right after it happened and felt terrible. But it happened. It's enough to plant a really small seed of possibility. I guess I do still have a question though. Should I pursue the topic any further? Should I tell her that I'm okay with a male friend, but that certain activities make me uncomfortable? Like one-on-one activities. Should I tell her what level makes me uncomfortable? Or should I assume that she'll know? Not that I'd ask her to say no to a lunch with just her and her friend, but if she knew how it made me feel, maybe she'd ask another friend to come along. I've been stewing on this for the past couple hours and I realize I need to talk about this more with my wife. You have nothing to worry about is not enough for me. I want to talk about what makes me uncomfortable. I do not want to tell my wife what to do. I just want her to know how certain scenarios could make me feel and how previous instances made me feel and why. I don't think I want an explanation. I only want to let her know what boundaries I feel okay with. I have a hard time thinking quickly on my feet. I have to process. It takes time for words and implications to sink in for me, so I think I'm going to write down an outline of what I want to say, what I want to cover. I know that sounds weird, but if I don't it could take the conversation south, quickly. My wife just texted me to tell me school is out early and she's on the way home, so not enough time today to write up what I want to say. We're going on a run before I pick the kids up from daycare. Maybe I'll touch on the distant topic first. I don't need an outline to just talk. It's the topic of concern that I'll get flustered with and lose my train of thought. It'll come out wrong if I just wing it. I know myself well enough for that. No harm in waiting a couple more days. I am self-employed. Some days are laid back. Today, others are not tomorrow. Update. I made time to write up what I wanted to talk about before she got home. It was uncomfortable for both of us. Neither of us have these types of discussions often. The conversation went well. I drew up the 4 points that led me to feel jealous. Essentially the texting, which is not a big deal to me, but coupled with the one-on-one run, it was troubling. The run, she invited 4 classmates total. Her male friend was the only one to show. I specifically remember her telling me that she ditched him around the track and that he was surprised at her running speed, stamina, the lack of talking about him since. She says that she had cut back the amount of time she'd spent with him this week. She had not thought of him in any fashion other than a friend and realized that if I felt some jealousy, that maybe there was more to it. She's jumping out of the shower. I'll finish tomorrow. Although I trust my wife, I will not close my eyes and ears to warning signs, but as of today, I feel confident that I do not have anything to worry about. It's hard to really convey an entire situation to a page of words. Many factors come into play in life's decision-making, and specifically my approach to this issue. I'll give an example. My wife is an internet junkie, text message fiend, so texting someone 200 times is not out of character. She texts 1,000s of times monthly. In this situation, 200 to this specific individual would now be inappropriate though in my opinion. Of course, there are many more factors you just can't know. I don't have the time. I appreciate that some people feel a line in the sand needed to be drawn. I on the other hand don't agree. A line in the sand for me, that's what had to be drawn. I'll explain. I wrote out 2 quick pages before I sat down with my wife and talked about what was happening. I explained to her that even though initially I thought it would be enough to just ask if I had anything to worry about, and her reply alone would suffice, it was not. I told her that I would give her the items of concern. From my point of view, whether they were unfounded or not, I gave her my interpretation of the situation. I did not tell her that I read her texts. The main points: texting more frequently, running, just the 2 of them, texting late at night. The biggest issue was the running, and to me, the second biggest was the removal of his name from the day's discussion. Or near removal. She invited 4 people to run. He was the only one to show. She ran at her pace, not at a slower pace to make conversation, or spend time together. As I said before, I specifically remember her telling me about how he was not able to keep up and was ditched during the run. Explanation for leaving him out of the day's discussion. I told her I thought she was leaving him out of her summary of the day to protect my insecurities, to keep me from feeling uncomfortable. She explained this. She never thought of this guy in any form other than a friend. He was a member of the 3 Musketeers last semester and now with only my wife and him left, she didn't think anything different of it. But, when I mentioned that I felt jealous, she put 2 and 2 together and made 3. 95. She suspected that maybe he did have feelings deeper than platonic and made it a point to spend less time with him, and what time she did spend she's intentionally made the effort to include other classmates. She said that she doesn't want to take a chance, that she doesn't want to put herself in a position to mislead this guy in any way. The collateral benefit of this is that I didn't hear his name nearly as much in the week's debriefing. Some might say, what about the class movie? I remember the date of the move they met up for. It was the day after I mentioned my initial concern. I can only surmise that she didn't want to break off a planned event, one that was harmless, but had she the opportunity to replan, I'm sure she would have either asked their classmate to be there or gone alone. Her explanation of the texts was 100% truthful. She didn't know I knew what was in them, but they were what she said they were. Drawing a line. I explained to her what boundary make me uncomfortable. What line I will not smile about, joke about, what level of friendship I certainly will not allow on my end. Time spends together alone, not literally alone, but just the 2 friends of opposite gender together. I explained to her that I would never take female friend to lunch, just the 2 of us, and that if I went to lunch with a group of coworkers and all that was left was myself and a single female, I would finish my food, I'd be courteous, not chatty, and I'd tell my wife as soon as was reasonably possible about the situation. So, I didn't draw a line for my wife. I drew a line for me. She now knows unequivocally what level of friendship will bother me, and what she can expect from me when it comes to interpersonal relationships of the opposite gender. I left the ball in her court when it comes to her friendship with this guy. Telling her what to do at this point would be controlling. You want to know what I honestly think? I think that after I voiced my concern, she thought about it and realized it's possible he may have an interest in her. I also think she took a step back and looked at herself and realized she may be leaning on this guy more than she should have. I think she realized that she may be too close. This is my interpretation. This was not voiced. I trust my wife to handle this appropriately. The conversation ended with her understanding what will bother me, not what will give me a pang of jealousy, what will hurt me and piss me off. How she approaches this friendship and friendships with males in the future is her decision. I'm confident that she'll have our marriage in mind. I heard several replies suggesting a command from me in order to stop interaction with this guy. Although I understand why you feel that way, this is not at that level. If I see that inappropriate interactions are still going on after this conversation, I will draw a line in the sand on her side. Only then would it be appropriate in my opinion. My comment: his approach may or may not work by example. I think what he did was a very good thing, but I also think that in general it is far better to have equitable boundaries. I do not believe one should set boundaries for themselves and leave the other boundaries to be their business. That is close but seems very flawed ultimately. It seems some men just cannot cross that boundary of looking like they are controlling someone else. Oh well, I wish him luck. Again, I think his discussion was very good, just maybe a tad short of perfect.